When my father left me only $500 and gave $240,000 to my cousin, I thought it was favoritism until I uncovered the truth. My name's Ethan Clark. I'm 37 years old, live in Portland, Oregon, and I had always considered myself a man who could handle bad news. That morning proved me wrong. The will reading took place in a cramped, wood-panelled office downtown. The blinds were half closed, making the whole place feel like a cheap detective movie set. My father had passed away 3 weeks earlier after a sudden stroke, and this was a moment everyone in the family had been dreading, or, in my cousin Mason's case, maybe anticipating. I sat at the oval table with my mother, my younger sister Lily, and Mason, who kept checking his phone like he had a flight to catch. My father's lawyer, Mr. Keane, wore a grey suit that looked like it had been bought in the 80s. He cleared his throat. "To my son, Ethan, I leave the sum of $500. I thought I misheard him. 500? I blinked at Keane. Sorry, what? He repeated it. My stomach dropped. Mason's lips twitched upward. Keane continued. To my nephew, Mason, I leave my house on Sycamore Street, all its contents, and the sum of $240,000. Lily gasped. My mother's hand tightened around her handbag. I sat frozen, heat rising in my chest. The house alone was worth at least $400,000. I had the cash, and Mason was walking away with over $500,000. Keane read the rest of the will, but I barely heard it. My ears were ringing. Dad had never been an emotional man, but he'd always been fair, or so I thought. When it ended, Mason stood and stretched like he'd just finished a casual lunch. Guess he knew who put it to good use, he said, stuffing his phone in his pocket. I clenched my jaw. What's that supposed to mean? He smirked. You've never been good with money, Ethan. Dad knew that. The nerve of him calling my father Dad grated on me. He was my uncle's kid, not my brother. My mother was staring at the floor, avoiding my eyes. We left the office in tense silence. Outside, the city was bright and louder buses hissing to a stop, car horns echoing. But all I could hear was Mason's smug voice. When we reached the parking lot, my mother finally spoke. Ethan, you need to let this go. Her tone was sharp, almost rehearsed. Let it go? I laughed bitterly. He gave everything to Mason. Why? Did I do something so terrible? I don't remember. She looked away toward the street. It's complicated. Her voice trembled. Something was off more than just favoritism. I stepped closer. Complicated how? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The car horn blared nearby, making her flinch. Not here, she said. Come by the house tonight. I'll tell you what I can. That was the first time I realized my father's decision might not have been his alone. And as I'd find out later that night, my mother had been hiding something from me for over 30 years. I drove to my mother's place in the rain, the wipers ticking like a metronome. The whole drive, I replayed the will reading in my head, Mason's smirk burning into my mind. The man had never worked a steady job in his life, yet he was suddenly richer with my father's blessing, apparently. When I walked into the house, the air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Mom was in the kitchen, pouring tea into 2 smash mugs. Her hands trembled just enough for me to notice. Sit, she said. I did, waiting for her to start. She didn't meet my eyes. Your father and I, we kept certain things from you, things we thought were best left alone. That's not an answer, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Why Mason? Why give him everything? She hesitated, then reached into her cardigan pocket and slid a small brass key across the table. This opens the bottom drawer in your father's study desk. It's locked for a reason. You'll find a folder there, black, no label. My pulse picked up. Why not just tell me? Because once you see it, you can unsee it, she said. And you'll have questions I might not want to answer. Something about her tone made my skin crawl. She wasn't just afraid of my reaction, she was afraid of the contents. I left the tea untouched and went straight to Dad's study. The room hadn't changed in years. Shelves crammed with history books, the faint scent of pipe tobacco still lingering. I crouched by the old oak desk, the key cool in my hand, and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a single black folder, just like she said. My heart thudded as I pulled it out and opened it. The first page was a birth certificate, not mine. The name read Mason Clark, but the father failed. It didn't say my uncle's name. It said Edward Clark. My father's name. I froze. My mind refused to process it at first. I flipped through the folder of letters, receipts, and a series of old bank statements. One caught my eye, a deposit of $10,000 to A. Marissa H., dated exactly 9 months before Mason was born. From behind me, my mother's voice was quiet but sharp. Put it back. I turned. She was standing in the doorway, her face pale but her eyes steady. Tell me this isn't what it looks like, I said. She exhaled slowly, almost like she'd been holding her breath for years. Mason is your father's son. The floor felt like it shifted under me. My father hadn't just given Mason his estate because of favoritism, he'd given it to his other son. Before I could speak, she added something that made my stomach clench even tighter. And that's not the worst of it, my mouth went dry. Not the worst of it. How does it get worse than finding out my dad had a secret kid? Mum stepped into the study, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it like she was holding something back, mating me. Your father owed money, she said. A lot of money, and Mason, he was part of the deal. I stared at her. Part of the deal? What does that even mean? She rubbed her temple, avoiding my eyes. Back in the late 90s, your father made some bad investments, real estate that went nowhere. He borrowed from a man named Harold. Bet it he's the kind of man you don't borrow from unless you're desperate. Interest piled up. By 2001, the debt was over $150,000. I remembered the tension in the house back then, hushed arguments, Dad's sudden business trips. But I'd always assumed it was just money stress. One night, Mum continued, Harold came to the house. I wasn't home. Your father told me later that he'd made a private arrangement. Harold had a daughter, Marissa, young, just out of college. He set her up with your father as part of settling the debt. Then Mason was the result. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me. So Dad chose to have a kid with another woman to erase the debt. She gave a short, bitter laugh. Shows I'm not sure how much choice he had. Harold wasn't the type to negotiate. My brain spun, trying to connect the dots. And the money from the will? Harold died years ago, but Marissa kept in touch with your father. He sent her money every month for Mason's schooling, his apartment, everything. That's why we never had much extra. The estate, the house, is all going to Mason now because your father promised Marissa he'd take care of him if anything happened. I sank into the leather chair, its cracked surface creaking under me. So all my life, I've been second place to a son no one told me existed. Mum reached into her bag and pulled out a folded paper. It's not just that. Mason knows about you and he's known for years, but he doesn't want you knowing the full story. He asked your father for something before he died. I unfolded the paper. It was a photocopy of a check dated 6 months ago for $25,000. The memo line read silence. Dad paid him to keep quiet. I asked. No, Mum said softly. Mason demanded it, or else he'd go public about your father's deal with Harold Bennett. The room felt smaller by the second. My father had been manipulated, maybe even blackmailed, by his own son, and I'd inherited a measly $500. From the hallway, there was the sound of a front door opening. Then Mason's voice. Ethan, you here? Mom's eyes widened. He can't see that folder, she whispered. And that's when Mason stepped into the doorway, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the papers in my hands. Mason's eyes locked on the folder in my hands, his confidence flickering for a moment. Then, with a casual step, he entered the room. Looks like you've found my little family secret, he said, voice smooth but cold. Didn't expect you to be so curious. I stood, anger twisting inside me. Why hide this? Why keep me in the dark all these years? He shrugged. Because Dad wanted it that way, because some things are easier left buried. I was about to respond when Mom interrupted, her voice sharp. Mason, put that down. You're not taking that folder. He glanced at her, then back at me. Mom, Ethan's just upset. I get it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. This just came in the mail today. I snatched it from him and opened it. Inside were bank statements, hundreds of thousands of dollars moved between accounts under my name. My heart skipped. What is this? Mason's grin widened. Your inheritance, Ethan, or what's left of it. I stared harder. The statement showed the estate's money vanishing, hundreds of thousands gone, drained from my accounts over the last 6 months. Someone's been siphoning the money, Mason said. Funny thing, it wasn't me. My mother gasped. Ethan, it was your sister. My head snapped to Lily, who stood frozen in the hallway, eyes wide. I felt like the floor had cracked open beneath me. Lily, my own sister, the one I trusted, is stealing from me. She finally spoke, voice trembling. I didn't want to, Ethan, but Dad, he was always harder on me, said I'd never be good enough. Mason got everything, and I got nothing. I needed to help myself. The room spun. Betrayal wasn't just layered, it was suffocating. You lied to me, I whispered. All this time. Lily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry. And in that moment, I realized the truth was darker than I imagined. My father's secret son was real. The money was disappearing, and the people closest to me were fighting over scraps in silence. I looked at Mason. Why are you really here? He smiled, but this time it wasn't the usual smugness. Because I'm not just your cousin. His words hung in the air like a thunderclap. I'm your half-brother too. Mason's words echoed through the room, sinking into every corner like a storm. Half-brother. The label twisted everything I thought I knew about my family. I stared at him, voice barely steady. You're saying you and I share the same father? He nodded slowly, eyes sharp. That's exactly what I'm saying, Ethan. We both carry his blood. My mind raced. The betrayal, the secret, the stolen money, it all felt like a trap tightening around me. Lily wiped her tears, trying to steady herself. This family's been tearing itself apart for years. I didn't know where I fit. Mom's face was pale, strained. We all made mistakes, terrible mistakes. The tension in the room was suffocating. I clenched my fist, trying to push down the flood of anger. So what now, Mason? You have the house, the money, and a secret I was never supposed to learn, and Lily's been stealing from me. Mason shrugged. You want the truth. Dad's death didn't end with Harold Bennett. He was involved with dangerous people who made sure the estate was tied up in red tape and threats. I felt a cold sweat break out. Threats? Like what? He glanced at Mom, who shook her head. Last year, Dad received an anonymous letter demanding he hand over everything to Mason or else. Lily gasped. I thought that was just paranoia. It wasn't, Mason said grimly. Dad was scared, and he gave me the estate to keep me safe. A heavy silence settled over us. Then I heard the sound of tires screeching outside, a car door slamming hard. Who could it be now? Mom whispered, voice trembling. I moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. 2 men in dark suits stood by a black SUV, scanning the street. One pulled out a phone and spoke quietly. My heart pounded. Whoever these men were, they weren't here for a friendly visit. Mason looked at me with a cold edge. This just got a lot worse, brother. The rain hammered against the windows like warning drums. Outside, those 2 men in dark suits lingered, their eyes sharp and calculating. I could feel their presence deep in my bones like a storm ready to break. Mom pulled the curtains back down, her hand shaking. They are here for the estate, for Mason. Mason's jaw tightened. No, they are here for all of us. Dad's debts didn't just vanish. Harold Bennett's family still wants their money, and they'll stop at nothing. Lily swallowed hard. So what do we do? Run? Fight? I looked around at them and my family, broken and raw. We need a plan. If they think they can scare us apart, they are wrong. Hours later, we sat around the kitchen table, poring over old documents, letters, and bank statements. The debts weren't just financial, there were legal traps, liens, and hidden agreements that tethered the estate tighter than I'd imagined. Mason leaned back and said, I've been preparing for this for years. Dad might have tried to keep things quiet, but I've been watching every move. Mom nodded slowly. We have one card left, a will amendment Dad wrote but never filed. It's hidden in a safe deposit box in Seattle. My heart leapt. Then we get it. We fight back. Just as hope flickered, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Stop taking, Ethan, or the next secret you find might be your last. A cold shiver ran down my spine. This was bigger than family drama now, it was a battle for survival. The lights flickered suddenly and the kitchen plunged into darkness for a second before the backup generator kicked in. I glanced at Mason, then Lily, then Mom. We're not alone in this house. We didn't sleep. The shadows in the house felt alive, every creak and whisper amplified. The threats had become real, but there was no backing down. At dawn, I called the bank in Seattle. After an exhausting back and forth, they confirmed the safe deposit box existed with Dad's handwritten amendment inside. It was the only thing that could overturn the tangled mess Mason and I had inherited. Mason, Lily, Mom, and I drove to Seattle under grey skies, the weight of years pressing on us. The ride was tense. I caught Mason stealing glances at me, as if sizing up an ally or rival. At the bank, the clerk handed me the worn envelope, its edges frayed. Inside was the amendment. Dad had left everything equally divided between Mason and me, an official document he'd hidden from everyone. This changes everything, I whispered. But before I could savour the victory, Mason's phone buzzed. His face paled. It's Harold Bennett's daughter. She's threatening to expose Dad's secret unless we pay her $300,000 by next week. I slammed the table. She extorted Dad, and now us. Mom's eyes filled with tears. This family's poison runs deep. We decided to confront Marissa together, hoping to end the nightmare. At a quiet cafe in downtown Seattle, we sat across from her, a cold woman with sharp eyes. You want money, Mason said, voice low. What if we call the police? She smiled thinly. You don't have that luxury. Your father's debts were with my family, and I have proof that will ruin you all. Unless we pay, I finished bitterly. Suddenly, Lily slammed her hand on the table. Enough, we're done being scared. She pulled out the USB stick. This has all the evidence, transactions, letters, threats that prove Marissa's blackmail scheme. Marissa's face twisted in rage. You'll regret this. 2 weeks later, Marissa was arrested for extortion and fraud. The amendment was recognized legally. Mason and I split the estate fairly, and Lily returned the stolen money. Sitting in the now empty house on Sycamore Street, I finally felt the weight lift. I looked at Mason and said, We're brothers, no more secrets, no more debts. He nodded, a ray of softness in his eyes. The past had been brutal betrayals, lies, and silence, but justice, cold and steady, had finally come home.